Project plans and approval process. Approval and communication. This is the last step in the planning phase of the project management cycle. And it's a quality control to ensure the project plans are complete and accurate. It's a process where there is a review of the plans, approval, we baseline all the plans, and we communicate the plans. The review of the plans means that we try to create a group of people, subject matter experts, including project managers from different organizations. It could even include the steering committee, consultants, or a project management office if there is a unit who provides support to projects. And they are in charge of reviewing the project plans that the team just developed. The idea again is that they bring a different perspective to the plans, making sure that the plans are complete, that there is good integration among them, and there is nothing critical missing out of it. It is also an opportunity for somebody else to look at the plans and understand it. In this case, you can have the steering committee looking at the plans and having a good understanding of the decisions that the team is doing to manage the project. And by doing that, you have an opportunity also that they know how the project not only going to be implemented, but also how we're going to monitor the plan, because we're going to use that information to track the variances between what we plan and what actually happens. So what do we review? This group, this committee, this team will review if the plans are complete. Many times, because of the rush or that we don't have enough time, there may be pieces or key pieces of the project plans that were not completed or are in the detail needed for that specific type of project. We look at how well they are integrated, that we don't encounter situations where we have to schedules, a procurement schedule that is not aligned with the project schedule, and that they are accurate, that they are actually, we are using the right information, and that is going to be useful because once we start implementing, these plans are going to be distributed to everybody in the team, and they're going to use them to guide their work. The approval of the plans is an authorization of the project manager to start the implementation phase. Usually you will have again a steering committee or a project board, and depending on the type of project, there could be either the donor or the funding agency involved in the process of approving. By approving, then the project team and the project manager can start implementing the activities. Once I do that, the first step, once they get the projects approved, is to have a baseline of the project management. And the baseline is a picture of the current values in the project plan. Why we use it? Well, we needed to assess project performance. We measure plan versus actual values, and it helps us improve future estimation accuracies, especially on time and budget. The baseline is what we're going to use on all these key plans, and when we're going to use them in the monitoring phase to look at what were initial estimates and how far we are from those estimates to make the required changes to the project. The first one that we need to baseline is the scope plan. So once we got all the activities and we identify those activities that probably were added or changed or modified during the planning sessions, they become the picture. And whatever changes we need to do, we need to identify where the change is going to happen and who authorizes those changes. So we have a good, clear understanding of what is the work of the project. Part of this process is also identifying the activities are not part of the project, and that's called out of scope. So it's important that in the document, in your plans, once you list all the scope that the project is going to be responsible, also list a section, create a section where you have the areas or activities the project is not going to be responsible for. Those are called, again, out of scope. And they help in the understanding of the project, and it also helps with the perceptions or information that some stakeholders may have about the project. Then we go and we do a baseline of our schedule. So we have our estimates of when certain activities are going to start and they're going to end. And with that baseline, we use it to track the actual performance. In this example, the baseline is in gray and the actual values are in blue. In the first one, we see that the schedule, the activity took less than what we planned. In another case, we see an activity that's going to take longer than what we planned, and that has an implication because that's on the critical path, and that's going to have an impact on our end date for that project. So the baseline helps us identify where we have those changes. So we have an initial idea of the schedule and the duration, but the reality was different. And that helps us then identify and then plan and adapt our schedule to those new conditions. The other baseline is our budget. We have our S-curve where we identify the way we're going to be using the budget in the project, and that is our planned value. And later in the monitoring stages, we're going to start tracking the information of what is the actual expenditures in the project so that we can compare it with the baseline. Most of the time, those variances could be because of the schedule when things are happening or the estimates that they were originally identified for certain items in the project. For example, it could be that the project estimated the cost of certain materials to be at one level, and by the time the project is implementing, there are going to be some variations in the market conditions that have increased the cost for that material, and that will have an impact on our budget. So monitoring early and using these baselines helps us monitor where we're going to be having problems so we can take corrective actions. We also have a baseline of our project indicators. We're going to spend a lot of time and effort on a baseline study so we can identify what are the values of the indicators at the moment we start the project. So we can look at the indicators at those levels in the project, and basically with a simple chart we can track that. We have in blue our planned target, what with the project it's aiming to achieve in those indicators. In green we'll have the baseline, the actual values that are coming from the baseline study that tells us this is the conditions that we have, and the progress in red tells us what is happening. And again, the baseline and the actual data helps us identify if there are any problems. And in this example, we can look at group 2 and group 7 that there hasn't been any changes from the baseline. There could have been certain activities, there could be some work, but something is happening that nothing is happening. No changes are occurring in those groups. And that helps the project manager to focus on those areas and try to investigate, try to analyze why is that happening so they can make some corrective actions and improvements on the next cycle. Once we got our plans approved and we got a baseline, then the final step is we need to communicate. So why we share the plans? One idea is that it helps increase understanding of what the project is. In terms of stakeholders who need information about the project, they helps them understand how the project will be delivered, some of the challenges of the project, some of the risks of the projects. It helps us build support from those key stakeholders that may not have a lot of interest by participating and contributing to the project and having understanding the role in the project, and by communicating we're sharing that information. It also helps us coordinate actions with other partners or other projects that we are dependent on delivering certain goods or services that we also will use, and help us avoid surprises, having people come in saying we didn't know, we haven't have any information or any problems that could happen. By communicating the plans, everybody's aware about when things are needed and how long it's going to take us and how much it's going to cost us. Who should be informed? Well, the project team. Everybody in the team should have a copy of all the project plans or have access to the project plans. They participated in the development. They also need to have an idea of all the information that is available to them. The steering committee, they also need to have a copy of the plans. Some internal stakeholders, people like in the finance unit, procurement unit, human resources unit, they need to have elements of that plan that correspond to the areas in which they're going to be providing support. External stakeholders, key stakeholders, the donors, some partners, they also need to have a copy of that. And if possible, even suppliers, especially the schedule, they need to be aware about when certain goods or services that they are going to be supplying are needed by the project. So by having that information, they can plan accordingly and be able to deliver the goods or services when they are needed by the project. Communicating the plans is the last element or the last step in our planning phase, but it's a continuous process. So anytime there are some changes to the plans, we need to go through the process of making sure that we approve those changes, they're incorporated into the plans, making sure that whatever change happen, it's also integrated into the other elements that are dependent on it. If we're changing something in the scope or changing something in the budget, we need to make sure that the schedule and the budget are also updated to reflect those changes. And once again, those changes need to be communicated to the people who are going to be using that information to take actions in the project. If we don't communicate and we make a change and people don't receive the information on time, they're going to be acting on the previous document, on the old plan, and that will create more problems. So it's important that this is a continuous process, that we make any changes, we approve those changes, and then we communicate those changes on those plans to all the people that are going to be using it to make actions in the project.